Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Geeta Krishnan. I am a faculty in the Transportation Engineering Division within Civil Engineering Department, and so today I am going to give a talk about the big picture. The earlier email talked about life skills for a civil engineer, so I put in my perspective here, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. And let's keep it interactive. If you have questions, you can ask me questions as well. So on an average, people may live about 70, 80 years. Yes. How long of this time, do you spend doing different activities? How long do you sleep, in your lifetime? 1/3. Alright. So it's said that, you sleep about 33 hours, 33 years, right? If your life is 79 years. Okay. It's more than 1/3. Why? In your childhood you slept more. Right? Again, when you grow older, maybe you'll be sleeping more. Right? Maybe now you're not finding enough sleep. Right? And if you talk about work, how long do you think you'd be working? How many years are you working in your life? And 0? No. Right? It said about 13 years you spend working, of your lifetime. Okay? That's a substantial portion, right? So that is actually number 2 after sleeping, right? So most of what you're going to be doing throughout your life, right, besides sleeping, is working, right? And then you have other things. Interestingly, screen time comes out to be the next major activity we do. This includes watching TV, right, surfing the internet, on your mobile phone, social media, all of that put together, right? And that's substantial. We don't even realize that, right? I'll talk more about that later. And of course, you do other things like eating, holidaying, and so on, right? And of course, exercising, romancing, socializing, right? All that is also part of what you do, right? So, a substantial portion of your time, you're actually working. How much do we think about what we do, right? What should be my career? Okay? Because this is what really defines most of your waking time in your life. Okay? So, it turns out that there are different job satisfaction theories around. So, one of the theories is based on Maslow's triangle, right? He talks about it as the hierarchy of needs. Okay? Every individual has a hierarchy of needs. Okay? It starts with what we call as basic needs, right? So, what are the basic needs? Food, right? Housing, clothing. Okay? So, many of our decisions are actually driven by this basic need. Okay? So, this is what you can say is the first hierarchy. Okay. Then people think about safety, right? Once this is satisfied, they start thinking about how to have a safe life, right? How to have a secure life. So maybe if you have food, you start thinking, is this good food, right? Will it not upset my stomach? Okay, things like that. Okay. Then it moves to something called as belonging, right? We are all social animals. Humans are social animals. We need others. We need relationships. Okay. So your decisions kind of start evolving to satisfy the third level of the hierarchy, the need. Okay. And then people talk about esteem, how you feel about yourself, right? Self-respect is part of that. Okay. And then Maslow says there's a level called self-actualization, right? What is self-actualization? All your decisions are driven by maybe something that you believe in from inside you. Okay, not necessarily something based on these other 4 levels of the hierarchy. Okay. So the same theory is also used for job satisfaction. Right? People say you kind of evolve in terms of your jobs. Right? Initially, it's about physiological need. You need a job so that you can pay for your food, your shelter, right? All of these. Then maybe you're looking at something much more, you want to have stability in your job, you want to have a secure job, right? Some people call it the government job, right? There is nothing like a completely safe, permanent job, right? It's always related. And then, you're talking about, is my job giving me satisfaction, right? Am I doing something good for the, society? So these are questions that you start asking, right? And then you also think about, is this job giving me, recognition? Okay. Am I being appreciated for what I'm doing? Right? So these questions become important as well. And then self-actualization, we really don't know what that means when it comes to jobs. Okay. But a lot of people said, this 5-level hierarchy is not really explaining a lot of the experimental evidence when it comes to how people choose jobs, right? So people came up with another theory, something called as motivator hygiene theory. Right? What this states is, you could actually move from being neutral to satisfied or dissatisfied. Yeah? And this scale is not continuous. Right? You could actually have satisfaction and at the same time have dissatisfaction with your job. Right? So it's very interesting. It's not a continuous scale. It is not like if you are satisfied, you're not going to be dissatisfied. You could actually have both elements. Right? And people came up with different motivating factors which lead to satisfaction. Things like, of course, your pay, right? Your recognition, how you are feeling in terms of achievement. Right? These are all motivating factors. And then you have hygiene factors which actually result in dissatisfaction. That could include things like, what is the working condition? Do you like your work environment? Right? How is the interaction with colleagues? Are you enjoying your time with your colleagues? Because more than maybe your better half, you actually spend more time with your colleague because you're spending most of your life working. Right? So these are aspects that one has to look at, is what Hertzberg said in his theory. Perhaps the most widely accepted model for job satisfaction is the job characteristics model. So what this says is, there are certain core job dimensions. Okay? This includes, your skills, not just your skills, the variety of skills. Okay? How am I able to learn and apply different skills? That's something that's important. Yeah? And it talks about task identity, right? Task significance, how important is the task and how unique is the task. Do you like being the cashier behind the bank? Maybe some people do, but most people think that's too monotonous, right? That identity is too narrow. Okay, so you want to have some broader identities, right? So you look for jobs which give you opportunity, right, to experience these broader identities, right? We also talk about autonomy. Are you able to work alone, right, individually? Okay. So that's something, is one of the core job dimension. And then feedback. Do you get chance to improve, right? Do you get constructive feedback? Feedback not necessarily to put you down, okay, but feedback to actually, help you improve, okay. So these are core job dimensions, and they say these job dimensions actually map into certain psychological states. So things like meaningfulness. How meaningful is my work? So maybe as a civil engineer, based on the talks that you've heard so far, you find, civil engineers really say that there is some meaning to what I do. Okay, there is a greater purpose to what I do as a civil engineer, right? So as a civil engineer, it's perhaps very easy to see, meaning in the work that you do. Yes, so that's a psychological state, right? And responsibility of outcomes. Are you given the responsibility for are you appreciated? Is somebody telling you that this bridge was built by such and such a person, right? That happens, right? But may not be, other factors, right? Other jobs that may not happen as much, right? And knowledge of results, right? So, do you know what's happening? Do you know what the conclusion is? Do you know what the results are? Okay. There are jobs in which you have no idea, right? As they say, you're just a cog in the wheel. You really don't know, right, what is happening. Maybe that's what's making the wheel rotate, right? Awareness of that is also important in a job. Okay? And of course, these lead to what are called personal and work outcomes, right? So you have good motivation to work, right? You have good performance, which is important, and you have high satisfaction. Right? We'll see what that is. And also, you can measure it using low absenteeism. So if you've been liking these lectures, then we have maybe more students attending, yeah, or maybe it's the attendance which is making you come, right? But these are measures that you can use to see how the job, how successful you are in the job, how meaningful the job is for you, right, and so on. Okay? So this is perhaps the model that's most widely used, and whatever career you choose, right, I would encourage you to think about these aspects. Okay? Whatever career you pick, how does it fit within these different elements, right? And what is meaningful for one need not be meaningful for another. Okay, it's about finding what is meaningful for each of you. Right? So hopefully, whether you stay in civil engineering or you decide to move on, it's an informed decision, right? It's not a decision that's just based on chance, but you think about these theories and then see what maps best. So we talked about meaning. So people talk about jobs as I want to earn money, alright. So is it true that money is what drives people towards jobs, or is it the meaning of the job? How many of you think money is what drives people? Okay. How many of you say meaning drives people? The rest of you can wake up. Okay. So there is a recent article, which said that 9 out of 10 people are actually willing, right, to earn less if they can find more meaning in the work they do. Okay, that's 90% of the people, right? And there's a very nice quote in this particular article, right? Work is about a search. Okay, it's a search for daily meaning besides daily bread. Okay, so earning money is only part of working, right? So you want recognition as well as cash, right? And you want astonishment rather than torpor. So you want to feel every day, I really love what I'm doing. I really like what I see, rather than, oh my God, I have to go to work today. Okay. So somebody asked me, when will you retire? Okay. In IITs there is a retirement age, which is 65 years. But instinctively I said, I'll retire the day I start taking one step at a time when I'm going to work. Alright. I typically take 2 steps at a time. So that's just, I want to get to work, right? That's the motivation. That's the joy I derive. I'm looking forward to work. Okay, that's very different from, oh my God, I have to go to work today. All right. So that is a big difference, right? And it is again in the study they actually quantify how much people are willing to give up for meaningful work, right? And they came up with the number that people are willing to forego 23% of their earnings if they can find a meaningful job, right? Again, nothing against other disciplines, but several civil engineers, over the last 10 years I've been here, students like you, they graduated, they took up a job in a non-civil engineering area, and within a couple of years they came back to my room and they said, I'm looking to shift back to civil engineering, right? Maybe I'll do higher studies, can you give me a recommendation, right? So these are people who are earning well, right? But they said, I'm willing to forego my earning to have a more meaningful job, right? So money is not the only motivation. Okay. So think about how meaningful your work can be. So that's about money and meaning, right? I'll talk about success as a civil engineer, right? Slightly more specific, but this could also be as an engineer or any other career for that matter. Okay. So just to make it easy to remember, I came up with an acronym. I'm calling it SOCIAL. Okay, let's see what SOCIAL stands for. So S is for skill. Okay, I'll talk about skill. The O is for opportunity. You always hear this, right? I'm not getting the opportunity, but I'm going to give a slightly different take on opportunity. Okay, because it's important. Right? The C is for challenge. Okay. So are challenges good or bad? Challenges are good. How many say challenges are good? Okay, that's nice to see. All right. How many say challenges are bad? Few. Okay. We'll see how, we'll see my take on it, right? And of course, you can have your take. You can share what you think, right? And then I'm going to talk about intuition, because this is something that's very, very important, and is often underplayed, right? And is in fact looked at, in a negative sense, right? As engineers, we are actually told to make decisions based on facts, right? Not based on intuition. again I'll provide a slightly different take on intuition, right? And A is for awesome, right? So I'm sure you've been awed by some of the lectures before, right? Some of the achievements in civil engineering has really awed you. You felt, wow, that's so amazing, right? So I'll talk about some of that. And L is for laughter. At the end of the day, you have to be enjoying what you're doing, right? You should be going back home smiling, right? If that's not happening, you really need to think about what is it you're doing. Is it really giving you the joy, right? So I'll take a few minutes. I'll talk about each of this, right? So when you say skill, the dictionary definition of skill, it says the ability to do something well, right? So you could do something, okay, 10 years back, or 15 years back, I could cook, but I will be the only one eating what I cook, right? But after 4 or 5 years of living alone in a foreign country and practice cooking, right? Now I can say, my wife will also risk it, right? She'll also share the meal with me, okay? So it's about doing something well. It's not just about doing something, okay? That's skill, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, they say, yoga karma kaushalam, right? What does it mean? Skill in action is yoga, right? That's what is said in the Bhagavad Gita too, right? And what's the opposite of being unskillful, right? There are different terms, right? Being skillful, of course, okay? Being an expert, right? So if you find a lot of the faculty here, right, in our department, they're so happy to do what they're doing. That's mainly because they are experts in their field, right? They're world known in that particular area, okay? And they're very skillful in what they do, right? So being an expert, right? And being experienced, right? Practiced. I'll talk about this as well. Okay? How do you develop skill? By practice, right? By repeatedly doing it. Okay? You won't achieve this, the first year. It takes several years. Yeah? Stanford University, in the civil engineering department website, actually states what is its motivation for education, right, for civil engineers. Okay, it says that a civil engineering graduate should leave with a suite of technical and professional skills. Okay, and it states some of the technical skills that they expect their graduates to have. Right, they have to be good in math, they have to be good in science, right? They have to be good in engineering. So all these are important, right? They say they should also be good in designing and conducting experiments. Okay, you will know that, right? It's also said that they should be good in analyzing the data. Okay, so the latest gold, as they say, is data, right? So we know that 1000 years back, gold was of lot of value, right? Gold was the metal which was valued, right? For the last 100 years, what is valued? What is valued in the world? Oil, right? Oil was the gold for the last 100 years or so, right? Next 100 years, what are people saying? Data, they're saying, is the next gold, right? So you really need to have the skills to work with data, analyze data, right? So data is going to be the next gold, right? So they say that that's something that they emphasize in terms of technical skills, right? And of course, you have to design systems, components, several kind of needs. It should not only be economic, it should also be sustainable from an environmental perspective, from a social perspective, and so on, right? So that's a skill that you're expected to have. And you should be able to identify, formulate, solve engineering problems. Okay? A lot of things you will do here in classrooms are solving problems. Okay? But in the real world, it's also about identifying problems. What is the problem I should solve? Yeah. So, of course, if you take up graduate studies, if you become a master's or a PhD student, right, you will find that a good part of your PhD life is actually spent in identifying problems, right? So that is important as well, to identify and then formulate, solve the problem, right? And another skill they talk about is using tools, right? All the tools that you can use to come up with your design, to come up with your analysis. So that's important as well. Okay. There is absolutely no doubt you guys will do great in this. You're all good in math, you're all good in engineering, alright. You will perform exceptionally well with respect to these technical skills. But what we need to work on is usually our professional skills. Okay. So these are equally important, if not more important. Right? There's another Stanford study which actually says 90% of the reason for getting a job is actually your professional and social skills, what they call as soft skills. Only 10% is the technical skills. Okay. Because most people do well in technical, they're all equally good. But when it comes to social and professional, that's where the differentiation really happens. Right? So what are some of the professional skills? They talk about working in teams. Okay. Not just teams, multidisciplinary teams. Right? So that means understanding others' perspective, being accommodative of others' perspective. Right? So it's important. Okay. They talk about professional and ethical responsibility. Did you have a talk on ethics in engineering? Okay. So maybe at some point you will be exposed to that. Right? It's very, very important. As engineers, you'll be making fairly big decisions in your life, and ethics plays a major part in deciding the right decisions. Okay. So it's not just economic, but it has to be ethical. Right? So that's something that's important. That's a skill to have. And then communication. I keep emphasizing this. Right? No matter what job you take up, substantial portion of your job will be spent in actually communicating what you're doing. More than what you're doing, you'll be spending time speaking about what you're doing, explaining to people what you're doing, justifying what you're doing. Right? So that's a very important skill. Again, there are programs in our curriculum which address that. You should seek out, you should see how you can improve your communication skills. Right? And then they also talk about certain awareness skills. Right? They talk about broad education, knowing a lot of things, that's important, right? And lifelong learning is something they emphasize. So your learning doesn't stop you, it continues. So how to be a lifelong student, and some knowledge of contemporary issues, not just being compartmentalized to civil engineering, but knowing what is happening in society, in the world around us, right? All these are skills. Okay. So you need to see how you can develop these skills while you are here, and all these will help you become a successful engineer. Right? How many of you have heard the 10,000 hour rule? Okay. So Herbert Simon, he was basically a psychologist and a social researcher, you can say. He won the Nobel Prize in economics, and he came up with this rule. He said, if you have to become an expert in any area, in anything you do, right, you should have practiced it for 10,000 hours, right? If you've done something for 10,000 hours, you're guaranteed to be an expert in that area. That's what he said, right? So, what does the 10,000 hour translate to? Right? Approximately about 10 years. So, I've just completed 10 years as a faculty here, so I can claim to be an expert faculty. Just kidding, right? But that's the timeline it takes to become an expert, right? So, people are impatient, they give up very easily. Within 2-3 years of a job, they say, oh, this is not for me, right? Many times the job you're saying is not for you because you've not been skillful enough in the job, right? When you become skillful, automatically you start excelling in your job, you derive satisfaction from it, right? So, stick to something for 10 years if you really want to be an expert. That's what it says. And again, this is another quote from our literature, right? So, it talks about abhyasa and vairagya, right? So, it says that the mind is actually controlled by practice and detachment. Abhyasa is practice, right? Vairagya means detachment. Okay? So, as we started this talk, 25 minutes, there are at least 6 or 7 cell phones that went off. Okay? The challenge today is much more, right? To be focused is more difficult in today's world than it was maybe 20 years ago, right? There are more distractions. Right? Again, Herbert Spencer actually spoke about this, right? The challenge to making, focusing and having attention is too much of information. So what you have through your cell phones, through the internet, is actually a deluge of information, right? In spite of that, if you are able to keep yourself, focused, right, then it is said that is the skill of this century. Okay. What is the most important skill you can have in this century? A lot of people, behavioral theorists and occupational theorists, they said the skill of the century is to be indistractable. And I'm telling you, it's so difficult. So you know how difficult it is. You start studying, right, 10 minutes, and then you pick up your phone and you're messaging, hey, how much have you finished? Right? Happens naturally. If you can put that away, if you can have certain detachment, right, that turns out to be a very important skill to have. And that will, of course, lead to success in your career. So it's something that you can practice. There is actually a book by that name, a best-selling book called Indistractable. Right? So you can look that up. There are techniques which you can learn how to be focused, how to pay attention, right? How not to let your attention get diverted. Okay. So that's about skills. The first S in social, right? Next is opportunity. So people think opportunity is luck, right? You should be lucky to have an opportunity. Right? But here are 3 very nice quotes on opportunity, right? I already had an Einstein picture, I have one more. But Einstein is saying, opportunity lies in the middle of difficulty. What does that mean? So if you want opportunities, seek out difficult problems, right? Seek out difficult, challenges, right? When you start seeking difficulty, then you will find opportunity, okay? If you're going to shy away from difficulty, if you're just going to be happy sitting where you are, right? Yes, you're not going to get the opportunities, okay? So Einstein is kind of hinting at where you get opportunity, right? And then, this is a comedian, Milton Berle, right? He says, if opportunity does not knock, build a door. Okay. So, you heard the saying, right? Opportunity knocks once, right? Or opportunity knocks only once. That's a saying, that's a popular saying. Okay. So, he's a comedian, he's just, flipping that around. He's saying, if you're not getting knocks from opportunity, maybe you don't have a door, right? Build a door, then you will find the opportunity knocking, right? This is also telling you that building a door is like maybe acquiring a new skill, right? Learning something new. Once you start doing that, then you will find opportunities open up, okay? If you're going to be stuck with what you have and what you know, and if you're saying, I'm not having any opportunities, right? Maybe you need to build, more doors. Once you start doing that, opportunities will come your way, right? That's a very interesting quote as well. Right? And a third quote, is from Thomas Edison, right? The famous scientist again. Opportunity is missed because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. Okay. So essentially what he is saying is, the people who work will definitely find opportunities, right? So it's not about opportunity. It's more about hard work. It's more about skilling yourself. It's more about skilling yourself in difficult areas, venturing into difficult problems. Okay. So, when you make a career choice, right, think of what is difficult, right? Think of how you can expand your skills, right? Think of putting in those extra hours of work. And when you do that, I'm telling you, you're going to have so many opportunities, right? It's good to have multiple things than to choose, okay? So, that's the O in social. Then I come to C, right, which is challenge, okay? So, everybody has challenges in life, right? Some people are successful, some people are not so much. Right? So, this is basically saying people who succeed are the ones who are stretching, right, to meet the challenges. Okay. And failure is basically people who are shrinking away from those challenges. So seek challenges and stretch yourself. So I was just looking for challenges in civil engineering. Has this been shared with you before? No. Okay. So there was actually a research article in one of reputed journals in civil engineering. ASC stands for American Society of Civil Engineers. So they publish a whole host of journals on research articles, technical articles in civil engineering. And this particular article looked at grand challenges in civil engineering. So if there is an area of engineering which has got really grand challenges, huge challenges, right? I think it's civil engineering. Okay. So they just list some of the challenges, things like excessive soil erosion, that's a challenge, right? Coastal erosion, that's a challenge. Just last week there was an article which said, Chennai will get submerged, or majority of Chennai will get submerged. Not just the coastal areas, even interior areas are going to get submerged in Chennai, right? If we don't act on climate change. Okay. That's a major challenge, if you think about it, right? And, water pollution is a challenge, okay? Water quality is a challenge, right? There's not enough water. Okay. Again, in Chennai we face that problem, right? Traffic congestion is a challenge. Energy consumption for this vehicular propulsion, that's a challenge, right? And perhaps related to pollution and traffic is also air quality, right? What's been happening in Delhi, yeah? That's a challenge as well. Okay. And all of these are not small challenges. These are huge challenges. These are grand challenges, right? Any challenge you take up in civil engineering is actually grand. Right? Nothing small about it, right? And of course, when you talk about structures, right, how to make them resilient. So, there was typhoon recently in Japan, right? Still the damages were so less. They said, the speeds were about 200 kilometers per hour, the wind speed in the typhoon, right? When we had in Chennai about 2 years back, it was about 150. I can't imagine what would happen if we had a 200 kilometers per hour typhoon in Chennai, right? It can be fairly serious, disastrous. Okay. So how do you come up with infrastructure that can withstand these kind of calamities, right? And again, because of climate change, right, some researchers are saying these challenges, these calamities are coming up much more frequently. We are having more cyclones now, right, more floods now than maybe 50 years back, 100 years back, right? So if you talk about civil engineering, grand challenges are aplenty, right? Pick any one and you can make a huge contribution, right, in your career. And when you solve one of these, right, you've impacted millions of people, right, for hundreds of years, maybe. What can be more satisfying than something like that? So think about grand challenges, and our area definitely has grand challenges. Okay. So that's SOC, then I have I in social, right? Intuition. Okay. So again, dictionary defines intuition as ability to understand something instinctively, right? I know what it is. That's intuition, right? And in fact, they also say without the need for conscious reasoning. Okay. So what does conscious reasoning mean? Applying your logic, right? So we think, we're told as scientists, we must apply our logic, right? We must be scientific in our approach, okay? But let's hear out from one of the greatest scientists of the last century, Albert Einstein, right? He said that intuitive mind is actually a sacred gift, right? Just as a rational mind is a faithful servant, right? So he's saying the logical thinking is like a faithful servant, right? But the intuitive mind is actually the sacred gift, okay? So we have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift, okay? Imagine this, he said maybe 100 years back, right? Now it's even more so, okay? You are discouraged to think intuitively. You are asked to go by logic, by data only, right? But to a large extent, okay, logic cannot transcend beyond what we know, right? And knowledge discovery happens beyond what we know, okay? So you have to take, a jump, a leap into the unknown, right? And that comes from, intuition, right? And is intuition something that's completely devoid of reasoning? Is intuition something which is, nothing to do with the conscious reasoning mind, right? Because when you put it that way, it sounds like a negative thing, right? Intuition seems to be something unreasonable, something like a reflex. But a reflex action, absolutely, right? So latest research on intuition is actually saying that, it is not something which is magical. Intuition is not a magical happening, right? Intuition is actually what you develop with experience, okay? But it gets embedded into your subconscious mind. So it does not come up to your conscious reasoning. Subconsciously you make decisions, right? And people actually call intuition also as a gut feel, right? I have a gut feeling that I should do this, right? So it turns out that, latest research which is looking at basically, what's in your gut, the bacteria in your gut, right? They are saying that has a very, very close link to how your brain, responds, right? So the bacteria in your gut is actually determining what your brain is thinking, right? That's again latest research, right? So when people said gut feel, maybe they were not, too far away from the truth. Maybe there is a link between what's in your gut, which is bacteria, and what you're thinking, right? People are still researching it, but yeah, it's an emerging area, right? And people are saying your emotions are not bad. People say don't be emotional when you take a decision. How many of you have heard this, right? Don't take a decision emotionally. Yeah, people are actually now, again, research is showing that emotional is actually a form of information processing, right? So emotion is actually helping you make decisions. Okay, so rather than saying don't be emotional, I think people need to say involve your emotions besides your intellect in decision making, right? Because quite often than not, that could be the differentiator, right, between a great decision and a not so great decision, right? I just want to share small, happening in my own, life. So, I was maybe your age. I just finished my class 12, and I had given JEE exam, right? And unfortunately, I didn't clear the JEE exam, right? Unfortunately, I don't know, right? Looking back now, and what happened was, I had instead cleared another entrance exam, okay, which was called in those days the Roorkee entrance examination, right? The REE, okay, and yeah, 15 years back or 20 years back, yeah, I'm that old. 20 years back, Roorkee was separate. It was not part of the IIT system, and they had their own set of entrance exams, okay, and I had given the Roorkee entrance exam only because of, everybody else was giving, with no interest. I had no idea of going to Roorkee, right? It was too far, right? But I didn't clear JEE, and I had not applied to any of the other colleges, and so I was stuck in a situation where I cleared Roorkee entrance and I hadn't cleared, IIT JEE. So my dad said, okay, I spoke to some friends, right? Looks like, Roorkee is a very good college. It's very old university. Let's go there and see what happens. Okay. So I went there. I had no intention of studying there. So, all I said was, I didn't have a very good rank. I said, okay, I'm going to fill up a rank which is, the fields which have, only top rankers choosing, right? Basically computer science, electronics, and that's it, right? Then somehow, my dad said, something is telling me that, you should fill up civil engineering, right? I said, why? He said, no, something is telling me, okay, you fill up civil engineering, right? So it was his intuition, right? And then I thought about it, right? I had known of a particular civil engineer as well, who ended up doing, transportation as his specialization, masters, and then works for United Airlines and all that. So I said, maybe, I'll have a career in United Airlines if I do civil engineering, right? So let me fill up civil engineering, right? Just before I went up for my counseling, I filled up civil engineering, right? But by then, my dad had done a very quick calculation. It turned out that civil engineering admission was already over, right? And beyond civil engineering, they had a branch which they called, pulp and paper or something like that. And then some people choose metallurgical as well. So he said, pull up, write pulp and paper engineering also as an option. You can always upgrade next year, right? And I'm furiously fighting with my dad and all that. And so I say, I'm going to cut out pulp and paper, and I'm cutting out civil engineering as well, right? And I was going up, right? Then again, something, that gut feel made me say that, okay, I'll leave out civil engineering. I'll cut out pulp and paper, because anyway I'm not going to get civil engineering because the seats are over, right? The quota is filled. Okay. So I go up to the stage, I give them my preference, and they say, congratulations, you can go pay your fees, you've got civil engineering. I'm like, oh no, you got it wrong, there's been a mistake, right? I don't want civil engineering, right? I want to go back, I'll prepare for JEE again, I want to study in IIT Madras. I'm from Chennai, so I said I want to go to IIT Madras, right? But, that was what happened, right? And today when I look back, I'm so grateful for the decision, alright, that I didn't cut out civil engineering. Okay? I'm so happy that I actually went up, I did civil engineering. I'm also happy I studied in Roorkee, right? And, rest is history, right? That's an example from my own life of, how intuition, the gut feel, right, is something that can lead you to great decisions, right? So trust to some extent at least your gut feel, okay? But of course, gut feel should come from experience, right? Don't go and say, I have a gut feeling this structure will collapse. Okay? When Professor Devdas Menon or Professor Gettu is saying, no, the structure is going to stay. Don't say, my gut feel says it will collapse, right? So gut feel does not, measure up to experience. If you had enough experience, if Professor Gettu says, yeah, I have a gut feel there is a problem with the structure, then you should listen to it, right? So be careful, right, with using this gut feel. Don't just go about brandishing your gut feel all the time, right? Okay. So that's intuition, okay. Then, awesome, okay, right. We already saw civil engineering challenges are so grand, right. Anytime you go see these buildings, right, you feel awed by it, right. So, I'm sure you would have seen some of these in the talks earlier, right. And the Jeddah Tower is going to be a kilometer tall, right. Just imagine massive structure like that. It really brings that feeling of wow, right, in us. So this is all done by civil engineers, isn't it? Okay. Statues, right. So again, when you go look at it, the first time I saw the Statue of Liberty, I was like, amazing, right? Why don't we have something like this in India? Right? Luckily we have it, okay. Over the last 15-20 years or so, most of in fact the previous slide on tall buildings, there is only one from the US, right? In fact this doesn't even list that, right? If you look at the top 10 buildings, there is only one from the US, the rest are all in Asia, okay. Again, when I started studying civil engineering, none of them were in Asia, or maybe one, right? The Hong Kong one maybe, I don't know, right? So it's all in the last 20 years. It's transformed, Asia as a destination, right, as economic power. Okay, dams, tunnels. So this is a tunnel that's being dug up in Washington State in the US, and look at the size of it. The people standing there, look at the tunnel. That was dug by a big, tunnel, boring machine, right, called Bertha. Okay, and that's how it's going to look like. You're going to have 2 levels of traffic moving, right? It's going to cut across the city. Right? It's going to reduce, traffic congestion, right? So civil engineering projects by nature are awesome, right? Just start, getting yourself involved in some of these, right? Feel the grandeur, feel the size, feel the scope of the impact that you can have, right? So, and transportation, that's my area, right? So these are some underground metro subway maps. This is for Tokyo, that one is for New York, right? This moves people, right? Transportation is the backbone of economy in any city, right? good transport system is what moves everybody, right? So building these, planning for these, right, is done by civil engineers again. Right? Fairly satisfying. Okay. And then the final L in social, which is laughter. At the end of the day, we should enjoy what we do. Okay. Here are just some jokes for civil engineers. Right? I'm sure you have some too. Right? I would be happy to hear them. Okay. And yeah, with that I'll stop my talk. If there are questions, I can take them. If you have some jokes to share, I'm happy to laugh with them. Right? Thank you.